Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Protecting Your Small Business from Cyber Threats, brought to you by Experian and BBVA Compass, and presented by Alan W. Silberberg. I'm Gary Stockton, and before we get started, I'd like to take care of just a few housekeeping items. You can download a copy of today's slides and follow along with us if you'd like. Just go to bit.ly/smallbizcyberthreats, putting the last part in the uppercase, and the link for the slides will be shown in the lower right portion of the slides. We want to make this session as useful and informative to our audience as possible, so please engage with the panel throughout, asking questions using the Q&A applet, which you should see in the WebEx controls. We'll try to answer as many questions as possible near the end of our program. And I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Dobers from BBVA Compass in her role as Executive Director of Business Banking. Elizabeth Dobers is responsible for P&L growth, sales force productivity, strategic plan design and execution of small business asset and liability products for distribution throughout the 7-state distribution network. She's been in the financial services industry for over 30 years, working for financial institutions with 17 years specifically focused in the business banking segment, which includes all businesses under $10 million in revenue. Elizabeth, welcome to the webinar.
Great, thanks so much, and thanks for everyone for joining. Before I introduce our featured speaker, I just wanted to say just a couple of words about how we at BBVA Compass are really trying to help our customers in the prevention of cyber attacks, and why this webinar is so important to us to make sure that we're educating everybody about what's available to you out there when it comes to cybersecurity. So there's two things when we talk to our customers. I think really it's about staying in the know and making sure that you're in control of your accounts. And two of the most important things you can do as a business owner, whether you bank with us or not, it doesn't matter where you bank, is to sign up for online and mobile banking, because as we all know, our smartphones have become our best friends, right? We take them everywhere with us. And having that smartphone handy will help to alert you if there's any type of attempted fraud or activity on your account. The second thing is making sure that you explore cash management fraud prevention solutions with your financial institution. I know we're showing you here on this slide that, about our award-winning mobile banking app. And again, like I said, I think it's probably the best. When I thought about this presentation and all the things that I could share with you out there, what came to mind first and foremost was the online and mobile banking application and some additional fraud things. So we'll talk about those later in the presentation. If we move on to the next slide, the mobile account alerts, I think, are probably, for many of you that have it on your personal account, we also offer the same type of alerts on your business accounts as well. So being able to monitor your accounts, I think, is the best defense you have in detecting any unusual activity. So there's just some examples here up on the screen. You can customize all of the alerts to meet your particular needs, but there's, withdraw and confirmation alerts. So if there's a single withdrawal entered, whether it's cash withdrawal or debit withdrawal, that is either equal to or greater than the amount you specified, it's going to alert to let you know that. There's activity alerts, there's overdraft protection notices, insufficient funds alerts, and then account balance alerts, which I personally love this because you can set a minimum balance that you don't want your account to fall under, and if it does, you'll get alerted to that. And a lot of times that will alert you early on that something's going on. Someone's trying to access your account without your permission. So again, I think mobile account alerts that we push out to you, you turn them on and off as you want to, but I think it's a very good way to keep track of your accounts. So moving forward, we're going to go ahead and get right into the heart of this, and I have the distinct honor of introducing our featured speaker, Alan Silberberg. And Alan is the founder of Digidax.com, which is a boutique cybersecurity company which helps protect governments, companies, and people from cyber war, cybersecurity, and reputational attacks. He is the specialist in the prevention of socially engineered attacks and in helping to create early threat assessment technologies and platforms. Alan has worked with Fortune 50 companies and U.S. government agencies on live cyber event mitigation, cybersecurity training, and implementation. He is a very sought-after speaker. We're very lucky to have him. He's often interviewed by popular media outlets such as the Wall Street Journal, Marketplace, Washington Post, and USA Today on cybersecurity. As a member of the California Cybersecurity Task Force, Silberberg helped to create the statewide response plan for the state of California in response to a major cyber breach and was one of the only small business owners as a member of the task force. As a subject matter expert for the U.S. Small Business Administration, he wrote the Cybersecurity for Small Business Training Program, which is available on the SBA website, and I hope all of you will go to the SBA website and download that. He was formerly an executive at Paramount Pictures and a staff member in the Executive Office of the President in the White House. I'd like to welcome Alan at this time.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I really appreciate being here today. So I'm just going to also jump right in. Your small business is not too small to need cybersecurity. Often we hear that a lot. My business is too small. I'm not on someone's radar screen. Everybody who's online or doing business is, has to worry about these things. So the questions that I often ask are, do you use money? Do you have trade secrets? Do you have employees? Do you use a website? Send emails? Do you create digital content or deliverables? Do you use social media? Do you or your team have mobile devices? All of these questions right away flag a small business owner, as something that where you would actually need cybersecurity. So what we're looking to try to educate you on, and also basically the things that small businesses need to be aware of, is protection from data and digital loss, the protection from cyber attacks and reputational loss, protection from hackers, criminals, competitors even, and also on the other side, you want to be able to provide positive due diligence records for insurance companies, for investors and clients about the strength of your cybersecurity and the protection of the data for your clients, and especially if you're in any kind of sensitive business that regards to HIPAA or financial services. So if you go to the next slide, please.
You bet.
Now, we have all heard cybersecurity horror stories. In fact, I'm sure some of you have some or many of your own. So let's start with a really common one. The FBI refers to this as the CFO scam. It's also called email compromise scam or business compromise scam. So here's the scenario, okay? It's 4:45 on a Friday afternoon. Your CFO gets an urgent email from the CEO asking, quote, why wasn't the payment not made to, a certain vendor or a certain business? And it was an emergency to get it done. The CFO, because he or she is responding to this email from their CEO, does what's asked, sends the payment out, only to find out on Monday that the email from the CEO is actually from someone pretending to be him or her using socially engineered techniques. Now in this case, sometimes there's often an email that looks exactly the same as the originating email, but it might have a decimal point in a different place, or it might have an additional letter or number. So in this scenario, the payment was made to a non-existent vendor, and it was too late for everybody, including a bank, to try to stop it. Okay, can we go to the next one, please? Second scenario, and this is something that we can all probably relate to. An employee comes in to work, connects their own device. This is often called bring your own device, connects to the network, and then accidentally exposes the network to malware. Now this malware then spiders through the network and the computers, the corporate systems, and then turns itself off to avoid detection, and turns itself back on at 3 a.m. when no one is paying attention. Then it exfiltrates the intellectual property and trade secrets by 4 a.m. Now again, this is just a scenario. These things sometimes they can lurk in a system for months or years. Sometimes they're very fast. So a website weakness also allows hackers to penetrate online billings, payment systems, and changes information to divert funds to their accounts. Next, please. Another scenario is an advanced persistent threat, which is what I just was alleging to, which are basically long runtime hacks that can reside in a network or a device for months, even years, and most of the time they're lurking there undetected. Some examples of this might be, HBO, Sony Pictures, the DNC. These are events where the attackers were in the systems for months and months and months without anybody knowing that they were there. So these APT attacks can exfiltrate data and digital property like passwords through keyword logging, and also get usernames, user information, trade secrets. They can also, not just do keyword logging, but there might be multiple ways in which your data could be stolen and or actually deleted or changed. Now, this is what happens to large companies and governments only, though, right? I mean, this is like what nation states do. Well, maybe 5 or 10 years ago that might have been true, but now small businesses are just as much targeted as larger companies. And again, especially if you're in any kind of a sensitive industry, if you're dealing with financial issues, healthcare, if you have content that maybe a competitor wants to steal from you, or maybe you've been in the news recently. And so this can happen to small businesses too, and in fact it happens to small businesses often. So in this scenario, all employees might get sent a well-crafted phishing email to start it, and maybe only one person clicks on it because most people ignored it, or maybe even followed some basic training and said, hey, this looks like a phishing email and I'm not going to click on it. But one person clicks on that link, and suddenly that APT is inside the system, and the networks and the systems and networks are compromised instantly. But the effects may be that you don't see it or recognize it for months and months and months. So some basic strategies and tactics to act now that you can take on your own, that you don't need to hire a cybersecurity company and you don't need to necessarily spend a lot of money on. So the first thing that we really fully recommend is to audit all your digital assets, devices, and vendors and users. And definitely keep that audit list up to date as employees change, as you bring in different vendors, as you go through your business cycles. Make sure that technical audit is complete, because that helps you to understand where problems might exist and how they might be coming in. The second, and this is something that I repeat everywhere I go, institute two-factor authentication, also known as 2FA, on all employee, all vendor logins to all the networks and systems. And this should include bring your own device, and also I would add social media platforms, websites. There should not be a step in the chain that doesn't involve either a two-factor or multi-factor authentication. One of the reasons is because it serves as a stopgap. Now, it's not something that's an end-all, be-all, but certainly this ability of saying, wait, you know what? Okay, so you compromised the password, but here's the secondary step that does stop a lot of hackers in their tracks. It's not foolproof, but it is definitely much better than not having something like this. And nowadays, most banks and most companies do offer some form of two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, depending on which kind of company it is, and also what type of devices or network you're using to log in with, and what are the purposes of your business. Elizabeth?
Yeah, sure. So, listen, Alan, that first scam you shared with everybody, I have to tell all the listeners out there that, this is real. We see this happen almost daily, and more than just once daily, where we're seeing our business owners get scammed that exact way. An email is being sent, and they believe it's from the CEO or the business owner could be to their secretary, to their admin, to whoever, and then they wire the money out. So this is real. This is happening today. But talking about two-factor authentication, we've got an example here up on the screen exactly how that works. We do use this with our mobile and online banking security features. But really, if you think about it, we used to just enter in a username and password to access everything. With two-factor authentication, the way it works is you have to, you can only complete various transactions or edit any of your personal information when you receive a one-time passcode via text message, And then when you want to complete these transactions or update your information, you have to provide two pieces of information, which is either your password and a touch ID, or a password and maybe a 6-digit verification code that will only be sent to your primary mobile number that has been authenticated and activated for this service. So again, very important, the two-factor authentication. As Alan said, you know, we encourage all of our clients to make sure that they've got that set up on their mobile and on their online banking, because you know, having access, of course, to where all your money is probably one of the most secure things that you want to keep secure. And then if we go to the next slide, this just talks about some of the online banking security features. Earlier I shared with you some of the mobile alerts that you can do that push to your mobile phone. But when you're in online banking, you know, there are several features that you can turn on. One is approvals. You can identify primary and secondary administrators on your online banking account that have the ability to approve certain types of transactions, either via mobile banking or online banking. So if you've authorized someone, you can set their limits. And if they try to, you know, send money out or do a wire per se that's higher than that limit that you've authorized them, you're going to be alerted to that immediately. You will receive alerts on any transaction that that person does, and it will require your secondary approval to do that transaction. So that's a great way to protect yourself. Being able to view your check images. You know, you can see the front and back of any check that's been deposited or cleared in your account via your mobile device and through online banking. This is extremely important because if you're still out there writing checks, there's a lot of criminals that are still getting to those mailboxes and pulling those checks out of the mailbox and changing who the payee is, and they're putting their name on it, or they're even changing the dollar amount, and then those checks go through. So you want to make sure you verify your checks that they clear for the amount and to the person you wrote them to. You can also disable your device. So if you lose your device, don't panic and freak out right away. You can remotely clear out anything that's saved on that device, turning off all your tokens, any of your Touch ID or fingerprint notifications, and you can disable those devices yourself through either online banking or through accessing another device that you have. Again, managing entitled users, you've got the ability to enable and disable their entitlement through mobile banking, and it terminates their user access immediately. And then there's also what we call two-way connect, and we use your activated mobile number to send two-way connect fraud alerts. So if we see something unusual going on in your account, we're able to send a notification to you, ask you, did you authorize this transaction? You're able to provide us immediate feedback, yes or no. If you say no, we immediately contact you to put a stop, a freeze. We don't let that money go out of your account, and then we look to see if your account's been compromised and take proper actions to either shut the account down or to close the debit card, reissue new card, or whatever you need. But again, a lot of work has been done around helping you to protect your accounts. So Alan, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. So some more basic strategies and tactics and things that you can do now, and also that not only can you do now, but you can start to work with your employees and start to train your employees on things that are important from a small business perspective to protect yourself. So limiting access to key data or key network systems to only those employees who need to access that specific asset. Now, that kind of sounds pretty simple, right? Like, you know, well, obviously, you know, only the CFO needs to see the financials, and maybe the marketing team needs to see the marketing information. But for most small businesses, they actually don't have those types of controls. Typically what we've found is that many small businesses, you know, create a network. They might wall off some of the financial information, but generally in a small business, most of the employees have access to most of that information. So I would suggest you start to rethink that a bit and compartmentalize that a bit, and really give employees access to what they actually need. And then that limits the chances that a breach or, you know, a compromise through an email or a device would affect everybody, and instead might only affect that small, group of people or that small bit of data. With the terms to reputational changes and whatnot, we actually recommend, it's pretty simple, create a Google Bing search in your company's name, your trademarks, trade names, DBAs, and just monitor these online changes. This becomes an early warning of something happening. Create a bring your own device strategy for your team. So if you're a small company and you're a virtual company and you're relying on a lot of people out in the field, or you've kind of realized that most people bring their own devices anyway, so why not just create a strategy for it, do that immediately. In other words, if employees are allowed to use their own phones or their own tablets, then you should create a way for them to access the corporate network on their own device, but in a sandbox or partitioned environment. So again, nothing can happen if one of those devices comes in already compromised, because often that happens where, especially with small businesses, employees will bring in their device from somewhere else, and by accident, maybe they picked up a malware or something simply by being on social media or by clicking on something, and then they bring that device into work, and suddenly they're sharing it, and it's not a fun thing to share around the office. Okay, next slide, please. So just to continue with the sort of basic strategy and tactics that any small business can take now to act. So initiate a red team event. This is basically hiring an outside party to try to penetrate your systems, to try to see if they can hack in, try to see if they can fool employees with phishing emails, and just test people. Do it once or twice, and then use the results from that event to make changes, number one. So obviously a penetration team might find holes, or it's also called a red team, might find vulnerabilities for you. So use those results to make changes immediately, and then also create a training program based around that event. So for the future, all right, this is what we've known in the past, let's move forward, here's how we protect ourselves, and even the smallest businesses should be creating some sort of basic cybersecurity training program, both for their employees and executives, and even for vendors and or clients, depending on the nature of the business. Definitely use robust firewalls in all of your doings. That could include email, it could include networks, and I'd also extend that to websites. There are many small businesses don't realize that you can create a firewall for your website separate from your network, and oftentimes that's done in the back-end settings of a website, depending on who your host is or how you've created your website. Use robust real-time system and network monitoring for cyber intrusion, including but not limited to antivirus and anti-malware programs. We would actually, depending on the type of business that you have, there are a number of cybersecurity vendors out there now that offer real-time artificial intelligence and machine language-driven monitoring tools, basically, that reside in your network or in devices and can actually alert you, very similar to how BBVA alerts you if there's a problem with your account. There are cybersecurity companies that can send you an alert, as something is suspected of happening. So before you're ever actually hacked, you're getting an email or an SMS saying, hey, there's something going on in your network, you might want to check it out. We also highly recommend that you start to include the use of virtual private networks, VPNs, for the use of all employees to log in remotely, and also for employees to conduct business if they're out in the field. Many small businesses often will park themselves in a Starbucks or at a hotel lobby. That is fine, but you should not be using those Wi-Fi systems. In fact, we recommend not to ever use public Wi-Fi without a VPN or some other type of obscuring process. Public Wi-Fis are a huge problem around the world, but in the United States, in airports and Starbucks and hotels, things like that, there's a large number of cybercrime events that happen due to public Wi-Fi. So VPN is a huge thing, and many small businesses simply just don't think about it. Some employees often will do it on their own, but we recommend it as a corporate policy. Ensure that your website is HTTPS compliant throughout, especially in any payment areas, client logins, and employee logins. Now, this might seem obvious. Google, in fact, is ranking websites based on whether or not they're HTTPS or not. If your website is still HTTP, has no security in it, no little lock next to it, It's often not only that you might have cybersecurity problems with that, but Google and maybe even Bing will actually downgrade your search rankings based on the fact that they don't perceive that website to be safe, that the information being transmitted from that website or through that website may not be safe. And so many people, large businesses and small businesses, simply do not think about that connection between the HTTPS and search, but it's becoming more and more important, but it's also equally as important in terms of securing all of your systems and the data. And again, for smaller businesses, this is something where maybe it's an afterthought or has never been done. But for larger businesses, oftentimes they'll have a public-facing website and then a separate area or separate website even for network and employee login. Many small businesses, however, it's all one. You log into the website, here's a client portal, here's an employee portal, all on the same website. So if it's possible, we would actually recommend that you separate that, and even if it's just to create a separate URL that's obfuscated, that's not out there in the public. You really want to try to keep that separate, because hackers will target those materials. If they see a website that has a dual, client employee login on the right-hand or left-hand corner, often that's a target. It's almost like, hey, let's focus on this website because we know that we can maybe use tools in the past that we've used to get another website, again, on this website, and steal information. So if it's possible, you should try to separate that information. And then encryption of all data in transit and in storage. Now, again, this sort of might seem like an obvious thing. If you're using a modern smartphone and a modern iPhone or a Samsung or any other variety, they have encryption capabilities built in on the phone itself, where a small business owner or an employee can actually encrypt all of the data on their phone and also on an SD card. But inside of a network, oftentimes we get lulled to a sense of security. Oh, well, we have a virtual private network, we have two-factor authentication, we have we have created containers, but yet the data is still not encrypted. So a good hacker, if they're researching your company, can spend a little time. They might spend several months during the research before they actually try to breach. So once you've gone through those initial steps, then take that other step of actually encrypting all of your data on your networks and do it in a way that you can then unencrypt it pretty easily. There are multiple vendors that offer different types of encryption depending on your needs. But it is really important in today's day and age to look at all of your data in the same way, that it all needs to be encrypted, not just financial data and not just medical information or client information. With HIPAA, I would suggest that you really take a look at that encryption and make sure that the encryption itself is up to HIPAA standards, that you don't want to be a HIPAA compliant company but then using some sort of encryption that's not HIPAA compliant. So, large companies often have cybersecurity training programs, and they have onboarding programs that work with the new employee and also ongoing employee training. Smaller companies often do not have such things, and what our recommendation is to pretend that you are a large company and act like a large company. Create a powerful onboarding and ongoing training program that includes, from the outset, cybersecurity. Cybersecurity should never be a layer that's just added on because someone said, oh, we need some cybersecurity training. The way that we all learn best about cybersecurity is to start with it early and then continue often. That you really want to have updated cybersecurity training every 3 or 6 months, because cybersecurity is changing constantly. The threat actors are changing constantly. The barriers to entry in terms of cost and technology are dropping dramatically. So where maybe 4 years ago it might have cost a hacker $10,000 to do something, to mount a large attack, maybe that cost now is $1,000. And it's becoming increasingly easy to find actually software packages that are sold online as hacking packages, just like you would buy a software package for documents or for something else. Hackers have now created very corporate-like situations. Some larger hacking cartels actually have, customer service logins basically. So if you have problem launching your malware on a company, they'll help you launch it. So you have to realize now that this is what we're up against. So it's important to have a training framework that's part of that onboarding process, but also on a regular basis. At least we would say every 3 months, but every 6 months, probably works for most small businesses. And this is really a very important aspect of cybersecurity. So there's ongoing training and cybersecurity practice, and when I say practice, I mean actually practice, like what does a phishing email look like? Maybe someone should send a phishing email, see if your employees click on it. Call up on the phone and pretend you're a vendor or pretend you're someone else and see how far you can get through the customer service process. How much information can you get from one of your customer service agents? Because socially engineered attacks occur by basically people probing, and they use LinkedIn and they use Facebook and they use other publicly available information about you and your employees to basically create a profile. And then someone picks up the phone and says, "Hi, I'm Joe Smith, and this is my account number, and I'm looking to get some more information." And a lot of times, customer service agents aren't trained at all to ask the right questions or to say, well, let's just really go through this verification process. And so companies, especially smaller businesses, get compromised often through a social engineered attack, basically just because someone wasn't trained enough to respond to it. And this includes third-party vendor systems and what to look for phishing, email, social media, SMS, and like I said, voice scams as well. Next slide. Also, large companies and government agencies, not only do they have a cybersecurity plan, but they often have a cybersecurity response team. Smaller businesses often do not have such a thing, and it is our advice that you really need to implement at least one person who is responsible on your team if there is a cyber breach in advance. Don't wait until the time when you actually have already been hacked and it's too late. You want to pretend that this is a fire, go through a fire drill, make someone be the brigade captain, and then also that person should be a leader in the company who can act and make decisions even in non-business hours. So this is definitely not something that you delegate to an intern or to the lowest person on the totem pole. This has to be whoever is running a response team for cybersecurity has to have the ability to make decisions, to get the CEO on the phone 24 hours a day, or the CFO or whomever, and to be able to act. And this team, what you create, I would say you should define it ahead of time, define what is being asked of that team ahead of time, and train ahead of time, practice a couple times. They're called tabletop drills in cybersecurity. I mentioned red teaming, where you actually have a third party come in and do a penetration test, or you have people pretend that they are customers and they try to get information from customer service agents. But the best thing in cybersecurity is to train, and then train again, because the hackers are ahead of all of us. The tools that they're using are changing constantly, and small businesses are just as vulnerable, if not more so in many ways, as large businesses and government agencies. So, and it's really not a matter of if you're going to get attacked, but when. And it's not why, but how much it hurts. In other words, is it going to hurt your profits, your revenues, your reputation? Is it going to hurt your ability to work with your vendors, to work with to work with the media? So be ready on this and train it, train again, and then repeat.
Okay, I think Elizabeth had some comments on fraud prevention solutions that BBVA is adopting and making available.
Yep, and I just want to circle back on the training Alan spoke about. I think as an employee, your employees will find great value out of it too, and will help them personally in their personal lives. So I know that at our company, we do a lot of training on cybersecurity for all of our employees on a regular basis. It has personally helped me, and I appreciate the fact that my employer is alerting me to what all the most common scams are that are going on out there, because had they not, I probably would have been taken advantage of quite a few times. But we also, just a couple more things I want to talk about on fraud prevention and services that we provide to our clients. Positive pay is becoming very, very popular lately. Years ago, if you think about it, your bank, we used to get statements mailed to us at home with copies of all of our checks in the mail, and you used to have a bookkeeper sit down and you'd go through every single copy and reconcile it with your statement. And you don't have to do that anymore. Positive pay is a great way to be able to see what's going through your account in real time. And at BBVA Compass, we're the first U.S. bank to offer actually true real-time positive pay fraud prevention. The way this works, it's a service that's set up on our what we call our NetCash platform, very secure service. But our client uploads an electronic file to the BBVA NetCash portal, which consists of a list of checks or your ACH items that you've issued. And then as a check or ACH item is presented for payment, we, the bank, compares the presented check or ACH information to the file that you, the customer, provided to us. If there is something that doesn't match or falls outside of your business rules, we alert you immediately. You also can have access to review items online as they come in and submit your decision to either pay or return that item. So again, it prevents it from ever clearing your account and that money from going out and then you having to have the onus of having to go back and then try to get that money back, which we all know can be a lengthy process. So again, positive pay I think is really a great new, very rich feature that a lot of banks are offering that small business owners absolutely, if you're writing checks or doing ACH transactions, you should take advantage of that service. The second thing I want to talk about is really ACH. And, you know, ACH is automated clearinghouse, so using ACH authorizations to help prevent fraud allows specific ACH debits to transact on your account. You can also elect to block all ACH debits, meaning that no ACH debit can come through, and same on ACH credits. You can also submit all the time of implementation a list of all authorized vendors. So you can give us the vendor name, ACH origination ID, that lets us know that you've authorized this person to debit your account at particular times. So again, ACH authorizations is a great way, again, to protect yourself. Then there's ACH direct deposits. So very low-cost electronic method of making paperless payments. You can do direct deposit for your employees of their payroll or bonuses, any type of reimbursements that they need. And you can also use direct deposit for business-to-business payments as well and for your tax payments. Again, stopping check fraud, check fraud is still very prevalent out there, but this helps to reduce check fraud because it doesn't contain any of your personal account information. So anybody that you're making a payment to doesn't get to see your bank account number and your routing number and your signature in order to fraud you and duplicate your check. So it really eliminates stop payment fees. You know, those can get costly if you're having to put stop payments on a lot of checks because you don't have lost or missing checks anymore. And it does control the payment timing and ensures on-time payments are made. So I'm going to switch back over to Alan for him to give us what's coming up for the future of cybersecurity.
Thank you. The future of cybersecurity for small business, what's in store for your small business? What's in store for all of us, really? So earlier I mentioned artificial intelligence and machine language. So let's start with artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence attacks are already happening. In fact, there is malware now that it's called polymorphic malware, that will literally change the disposition of what it looks like. As soon as it believes that it has been found or identified, it will literally morph into something else, and it uses artificial intelligence to do that. Machine language attacks, you see that a lot with denial of service attacks. You see that with brute force attacks. And the combination of artificial intelligence and machine language are creating things like deepfake videos. Deepfake video is when people use computers and software to create a fake video that looks so real, like a person speaking, that the average person cannot tell the difference between the real person and the deepfake video. But this is also occurring in audio attacks as well. And these attacks are often used as a first stage, basically, so that this is sort of how to get you to click on something, or how to get you to go to a compromised website, and then maybe that might lead to a multi-stage attack beyond that. The polymorphic malware is something that has been going on for a while, but it's getting smarter because the criminals are actually using the artificial intelligence to basically train the polymorphic malware upon itself And we've actually seen types of polymorphic malware that as soon as it's discovered, it will embed itself in such a way that it looks like a regular part of your system, and even some of the best trained network system engineers may not see the difference between what looks to be real on their network and the thing that's faking it. Advanced social engineering and phishing attacks are already happening, and this is going to increase dramatically because the explosion of mobile devices and tablets, combined with people using more and more different types of social media and chat apps and different types of apps to communicate. Each time there's a new platform that comes out or a new device, it creates multiple new attack surface areas, is what it's called. And these attack surface areas grow exponentially depending on how many people are in your business and how many devices are being used. If you have 100 employees and you've got 100 employees on a mobile phone, on a device, how many of them are also on social media during the workday? How many of them are also using chat apps? And so you end up having, for every one person, you might have 10, 15 different attack surface areas. And the more that all of us start to communicate and use IoT devices and mobile devices, the more that these attack surface areas become more prevalent. And it becomes easier and easier for the hackers to attack them because they can learn, the people can learn from, well, what worked last time, let's try it again, and then we'll just keep repeating it and then change it. And the criminals are always a couple steps ahead of us, and you have to realize that it's become cheaper and easier for them. And so these things will continue to move forward as threats and probably get more and more pervasive. Data is already for sale on the dark web. It's not hard to go on the dark web. It's not hard to find that data. And this is just going to increase more and more and more. With the Marriott hack, for example, 500 million people's travel information is out there. Most likely it's already on the dark web, or at least parts of it are. What does this mean for the small business? I mean, obviously larger companies and governments they're focused on this and they're looking at it. But what it means for small businesses is, you have to go back to what we were saying earlier. Create a training program. Create steps. Make sure that your employees are really doing the basics, everything from two-factor authentication to multi-factor authentication, all the way up to training and practicing and red team testing. But more importantly, it also means that you have to have an ongoing training program so that as cyber threats change, you can educate your employees and your vendors as well. You are a target. Don't believe that you're not a target. This will only increase. Small businesses are becoming more and more of a target because they are perceived to be a soft target as opposed to the hard targets that a large company or a government agency might present. And also the cost of attacks continue to come down as the sophistication of attackers goes up. So your small business is going to succeed through implementing strong cybersecurity measures now in preparation for being attacked. Don't wait until such time as you've already been attacked, because that's too late at that point. Small businesses need to take advantage of larger companies' security offerings and include this includes cloud offerings and social networks as well. So by this I mean that these larger companies do offer multiple ways to secure your accounts, but oftentimes it takes actually going into these accounts and the settings and really going to a granular level and going setting by setting by setting to make those changes. But smaller businesses can definitely leverage the things that are being offered by larger vendors and companies. And your company needs to layer cybersecurity. You cannot just rely on one type of strategy or one tactic. You need to mix and measure because the criminals are doing it as well. So the more that you can have a layered approach, the more likely it is that an attack will fail. You have to expect that cybersecurity attacks are going to increase in scope, in intensity, and in cost. More and more small businesses get hit every day in every industry. So you have to plan on it and be ready. You cannot assume that your small business is too small, that you're not going to get attacked. And small businesses can also use now third-party intelligence, artificial intelligence and machine language solutions to combat these next-generation cyber attacks and to do mitigation and monitoring just like a large company. So it's worth spending the time to investigate what types of offerings are available to you.
Okay, I did have a couple of questions that did come in. Ben asks, he says that he owns a small company. He doesn't have a network security specialist on staff. do you have any advice for choosing a good security consultant? What credentials should I be looking for?
Well, for small businesses, it's very important to ask, if the company has small business experience. There are a lot of cybersecurity companies that really only promote themselves to the enterprise class or government class cybersecurity. So the first question would be, what types of small businesses have you worked with in the past and who? What types of attacks? Often a company that does deal with small business will actually have a small business cybersecurity offering. There are a number of different cybersecurity certifications that are out there, so it's certainly important to look for a company that has certified people on staff, and also where you should be able to get your questions answered pretty quickly, ahead of time. Can you handle this kind of attack? Have you ever handled this? Have you ever handled this type of data? And then excuse me. So there's a filtering level. And then some small businesses really want to work with someone local, and some don't care. So that part, just depends on, I guess, more of a personal selection. And then also, the other thing is just to start to look into, what from a price perspective, what can you afford, what works for your budget.
Okay. There was a question from Andrea. She asks, she says that a business associate was a victim of a ransomware attack, and they paid ransom but were unable to retrieve control of their data. Should you pay the ransom?
Oh, well, that's a big debate. Unless you really need that thing that they took and you do not have any backups, we recommend not to pay the ransom. Because once you pay the ransom, you're really on a suckers list, and the next criminal will know that you paid the ransom last time, and they'll just keep coming after you. Unfortunately, criminals are not honest, so they'll take the ransom money and still not give you back access to your information. It's a real iffy situation. It's hit or miss. And we believe that that's really a decision that you have to make with your partners and your lawyers, maybe your accountant, and see what what the ransom is versus what you've lost. Do you have backups on your data? Is that backup something that you could turn on immediately, or do you have to go through a process to sort of get it reinstituted?
Okay. And then Robert asked, and this is probably a question for Experian, so I will address this one. How do I check if my employee's identity is on the dark web? I would say that Experian offers free dark web scanning. If you go to the Experian.com website, you can run a free scan or contact the business fraud group, and they would be happy to. There's a bunch of business services that they offer for dark web scanning. Okay, well, I think we're going to have to leave it there. I hope that you guys found this webinar informative and useful. We would like to thank everyone for attending today's session. Thanks to Alan Silberberg from DigiJax for presenting these valuable cybersecurity strategies. Also to Elizabeth Dobers from BBVA Compass for partnering with us on this small business event. Look for a follow-up email from Experian with a link to a recording of today's talk and, of course, the slides. And when you exit this webinar, we would appreciate it if you just answer a few basic questions. We like to create useful, informative webinars. It would really help us if you could just answer those few questions for us. And with that, I'd like to wish everybody a good day, and thank you for attending.